Antennen.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of A Walk Down Memory Lane. I'm your host, Earl Baisden. Joining me is Larry Hunt and the former president of the Bermuda Football Association, Mr. Larry Musselin. And we're here this evening talking about the life of Charlie Marshall. As we all know, Mr. Marshall, well, we're going to be joined also by the current president of the Bermuda Football Association, Mr. Mark Wade. As we know, Mr. Marshall put a lot of time in not just the sport of football, but in the community. And we're going to start off this evening with a moment of silence for Mr. Marshall. Again, good evening to everyone. Mr. Musselin, as a former president of the association, Mr. Marshall always had kind words and reflection on whenever somebody got into a position. And one of the positions that he really admired was the presidency of the Bermuda Football Association. So what advice did he give you when you became the president of the Bermuda Football Association?
First of all, I'd like to say good evening to everybody and also to extend my condolences to the family of Mr. Marshall. And he was a great asset to Bermuda in terms of all of the contributions that he made. I found out that he was really supportive. He would come to the Congress meetings, and he normally would be sat in the front row or somewhere up front. And he really gave some measured advice, and he was quite reasonable in the things that he spoke about. And I defer to President Mark Wade. Good evening, President. It's good to see you.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening, HVP. How you doing?
Hey, I'm very good, thank you. And I'm sure President has his own views about the advice that he gave. But, there were a few times that maybe once or twice a year, he would call me up and he would ask me to go to lunch. And it wasn't because things were going bad or things were going particularly good or anything like that. He just said, hey, let's go to lunch. And we would go somewhere and he'll sit down and just, work through a whole pile of issues. What about this? What's going on with this? What do you need help with this? All those kinds of things. So it was really nice to have that kind of support and also somebody to bounce ideas off.
Well, let's go to the current president because he had a lot of messages for a lot of people and a lot of advice for a lot of people. Just as Mr. Musselin has already said, to think through certain things. So what advice did he pass on when you became president?
Well, I interacted with Mr. Marshall mostly at the Charles Marshall tournament at the under-17 boys. And, it was always just a quiet word, same sort of thing, asked, how's things going? If it was a controversial topic, he'll say, what did he'd ask me, how did you handle that? Do you think you handled it properly? Those sort of things, quiet 1v1 conversations between him and myself. In that brief moment when we were able to, sit on and just enjoy a bit of time together at the tournament in his name.
Yeah, and Mr. Hunt, good evening. Clearly, you would have been first a player when Mr. Marshall was officiating, and then a coach when Mr. Marshall officiated. What were some of the things you remember about him when you were a player and he was officiating?
Well, I saw two sides of Charlie as a player. For some reason, Charlie had something against something.
What?
But my first encounter was in 66, 65, and it went on from there. And I think Charlie gained the guys' respect because Charlie was a man of principle. And he done his job well. And like I said, when you can control a guy like Randy Horton, then you know you got what it takes to do that particular job.
Did he need to be controlled?
I think so.
Randy Orton?
Well, I have a couple of stories for you, but maybe I don't know if you want to do it now or later.
Mm.
You can give us one now. You can give us one now.
One story was we had a game at National Stadium. It was a cup final. And matter of fact, we were losing at the time. And Randy kicked the ball about 50 yards between, at that time, which had stands there. The ball went through the stands. So everybody was just waiting for the ball to be retrieved by someone else. Charlie Martha went to Randy Hood and said, "Go get that ball." And Randy stood, we all stood kind of stunned, like, "You want this game to continue? Go get the ball." And Randy had to put his head down, walk 50 yards, and retrieve the ball. So that's one of our fond members of Mr. Marshall.
Sure. And well, Mr. Weir, you would have played, albeit younger, but you would have played when Mr. Marshall was still officiating. How did you find him as an official?
Well, my story is I was young, right? So I was trying to be that young rude guy, and I was thinking I was anonymous, right? You just only feel I'm young. This guy, there's no way this guy knows me, so I could do what I like. But I quickly learned that was not the case. And Mr. Marshall, in the game that I remember, he just shouted out, "Wait, cut that out."
Yeah.
And that left me with like, wait a minute, why does this guy know me? How does he know me, right? But of course, years later, I understand that he was in the telecom space, and he knew my father, obviously. And he also knew my mother. So it's like, again, not this again.
You weren't anonymous at all.
No longer anonymous, right? No longer anonymous. And these reports, if I carried on, might just get back to, my parents at the time. So yeah, because I was young, right? 18, 19, But yeah, it was always fond memories, and even the way he refereed games, fond memories of this, because there were some characters back then. So yeah.
So Mr. Muslin, you mentioned that Mr. Marshall would come to those Congress meetings. I in fact was at a few of those Congress meetings where, especially, I remember the days of even Mr. Christopher from Devonshire Recreation Club. These guys knew the Constitution, left, right, center. You couldn't really get anything over. As the president, how much confidence did you have that if something was going left or right, he could actually give you advice to bring it back into the middle?
Well, first of all, I've always considered the elders of football to be like Queen's Counsel, but the King's Counsel now, as far as Congress and knowing the Constitution, and I think President can tell you a whole list of those names, the guys that get it, that know it inside and out. I guess they were probably there and helped draft the Constitution or redraft it. But I think when you had some issues in a BFA meeting, by the time you got around and listened to various people, either the clubs or the honorary vice presidents who had probably seen the issues before, then things would get back on track. And meetings normally ended successfully, whichever way the vote went, but that was the membership that had spoke. So, so Mr. Marshall, I remember, when it came time to discuss things like conduct of either the players or some of the people at the games, he really put his foot down. You could actually see him get worked up. And he might be in the front row or two, but he would start turning around and talking to everybody else in the room, to get their attention. And he was pretty firm. And I think, most of the elders in the room were like that.
Yeah, and I do recall him actually standing up and turning around and facing the Congress and having those stern words and talks and looking at certain clubs and certain people that they need to take control of their grounds, basically. You know, he would say it in a manner where you dare not look away or you dare not say anything. You know, he just had that strong voice and that commanding sound, you know, behind him. So, Mr. Wade, someone like Mr. Marshall helped to draft a lot of things and put things in place for football, something that Mr. Musselman want to continue and you're continuing on now. But some of the things that the association would have had to deal with when you were a player, how do you think the previous presidents, including Mr. Marshall and Mr. Musselman, guided you to where you are today as an organization?
Well, I think they you know, he would have been able to model, you know, what a president looks like, walks like, talks like. You know, and I when I think of Mr. Marshall, I always think of, you know, a stately man, you know, and I could only hope that I can emulate that in some small way. You know, his aura, his presence, you know, and I think those are these sort of important things that I take away from, because I'm the youngster, I'm the rookie here in this little chat here today. So you know, I wouldn't have experienced so much of Mr. Marshall in his administrative role. Right?
Okay. Because you might be the youngest don't necessarily mean you got the
Yeah, that's a punt.
Yeah. So Mr. Hunt, now when you took over the coaching department of Somerset Cricket Club in the Trojans, you would have had some interactions with Mr. Marshall in a different way now.
Yeah, when Charlie was president of the Referees Association, he made sure pre-season he would send a referee to every club and explain the changes of the rules of the game. That was one important aspect of Charlie's presidency. And with Charlie's passion for the game, it helped me to stay in the game as a coach.
Well, we're going to take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have more of the life of Charlie Marshall. We'll be right back.
Putting down the weapons.
You seeing this?
Welcome to the new bulk store, Lindo's Next Level. Wake up in the morning with enough coffee to keep you running throughout the entire day. Your pet at home deserves the best. Stock up on dog food to keep your puppy happy. Need a quick, tasty lunch at home? Your chicken nuggets will be jumping right out of the freezer. What's a movie night without popcorn? You can never have too much. Lindo's Next Level. Why go anyplace else?
I'm also thankful and grateful because my greatest value of my life is my legacy.
But why I do it? I feel supposed to do it. I was put here to be here, to do what I'm doing right now. Once I see somebody moving, it's the greatest joy for me. There's a little person being born.
I am thankful that people have given me the trust, you know, for me to empower them, from my players to my family to friends, and that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that people have allowed me and trusted me to be in their life.
Welcome back. Well, Mr. Hunt, we know you're one of the founding members of the RO Veterans Classic between St. George's and Somerset, and one of the mainstays in that is always featured Mr. Marshall. Mr. Marshall, whether he was in the middle or on the line, he was always a part of it. What did he mean to that particular game, that organization, just reminiscing about our former players and former officials?
Well, without Charlie's help, that of his own side would not been as successful as it was. We started 25 years ago, and Charlie was involved the whole time. And with his contributions towards the organization, helped us a great deal. Back in 2019 was our 25th year, and Charlie had been involved for maybe 22 of those years. So we wanted to try something special. Not us, but Charlie. So I said, look, we need to do something special. This is our 25th year. And, we invited us down his house, and we used to have weekly meetings. And Charlie was a guy that everything had to be right. Do nothing halfway. Everything had to be right. So, like I said, we met, myself, Charlie, Stephen Painter, and Myron Brennan, and my daughter as the recording secretary at the time. And so we spoke to Clyde Best, and because we wanted to bring Sean Goda as our guest speaker for that particular 25th year. Well, Sean was traveling the world for Manchester City. So once Clyde said, listen, Rodney Marsh and I played in Tampa, and he's quite a character. So Clyde was able to get a hold of Rodney. And in the back of my mind, I was saying, how are we going to pay for this? Before we could say anything, Charlie said, don't worry about the expense. We're going to take care of everything. Don't worry about it. So Charlie would manage to put him up at Southampton Prison School for a week. Set up a golf game for him. And when he came here, was quite surprised and pleased to be able to play a part in our 25th year. It was a special year. Unfortunate that after that, COVID came after that, so we haven't played it ever since. Charlie took sick. He always said, we're going to continue this, we're going to continue this, we're going to continue this. But hopefully that we will in Charlie's honor. That's how much importance that he was to the Veterans All Stars.
Right. And Mr. Reid, as a person who helped to organize the Referees Association, I know he always had words for whoever was the chairman of referees, giving them advice and so forth. But just knowing that he was a part of that organization, starting it, becoming the president of it, what does that say about Mr. Marshall and his love for the sport?
Well, it just says that he was accessible to all areas of the sport, not just one area, right? Where he was willing to put his support behind different aspects, and that's always important. For me, he's an example that so many can still follow. In terms of supporting sport.
Sure. And of course, Mr. Musselin, when you would have entered politics, Mr. Marshall had long finished his politics, but I'm pretty sure, trying to manage everything as well. Just what type of ideas did you have going into politics as a president or former president of the Bermuda Football Association, like he was? Well, he was a politician before. Well, he would have been president of the association. So you followed his footsteps.
Oh dear.
Well,
yeah, that's almost 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. But I went into politics because I was invited to go there by the then Premier Alex Scott and to serve in the Senate and then serve in the serve as the Attorney General. And so that was good. It was within my field, and I particularly enjoyed that. I don't think spoke too much to Mr. Marshall or knew too much about his own political career to kind of, look to him as a guiding light. So I didn't have that much interaction with him on that basis. But I do understand that he was pretty effective politician himself. So I guess, Mr. Wade must be following on soon.
Well, I knew when he was a politician, Charlie, when National Sports Club closed, Charlie went to the government and said, listen, we need to keep this field up open for a community field. But unfortunately, government saw other ways, and so it never materialized. But Charlie really was trying to push for that field to stay open as a community field, especially for Devonshire Colts.
Well, Mr. Ed, Mr. Musson has put you on the spot.
But I'm just kidding.
Sometimes
I have my time.
But Earl, I didn't know if you had gone past or you were coming back to the support that Mr. Marshall gave with his foundation.
You could touch on that because we were going to touch on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that he and his family, his lovely wife, they made the contribution to football by setting up the fund, and then with that fund, I know that the interest was supposed to be used for development of the referees, and maybe President Wade could say a bit more about if that mandate ever changed. But he cared so much that he would put a huge amount of money aside so that it could benefit the referees. And over the years, Cranston Williams just has led the BFA to get more and more referees on board, get younger people involved, and now there are people on the list. So BFA has done a fantastic job on the President Reid to just get more and more referees coming on board. So, and Cranston works tirelessly at that. So, a lot of kudos to that. And I think that probably made Mr. Marshall proud, particularly in his latter years when he would pick up the newspaper and read to see that somebody else was on the list. Because, of course, for him, he was on the FIFA list, I don't know, 40 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
60 years, maybe.
60, probably 60. Yeah. No, the mandate certainly did change because the fund was doing so well. He changed the mandate and opened it up to all aspects of football. So,
nice.
So now that fund, can be applications can be sought from clubs, referees, as long as it's connected with football. So I mean, that was huge then. It's still huge now. That a single person would make that kind of put that kind of structure in place and create that fund for a sport. That's huge. Really, and it just means that his legacy just lives on.
Yeah.
I remember Charlie officiating in, I think it was 1970 World Cup, and he was one of our first officials to participate in the World Cup. We had a great friend of his, Mr. Klein. He's from Israel.
Yes.
Him and Charlie were like brothers. I mean, Charlie traveled back and forth to Israel with him, and he came to Bermuda. Charlie, like I said, was one of the great ambassadors to Bermuda.
Yeah, definitely. I remember he had Mr. Klein here a couple of years ago, right, Mr. Ed?
Yep.
Yeah. He spoke at a few
refereeing events. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you imagine coming from Bermuda, which probably back in the 60s or 70s probably had a population of 50,000 maybe, right? And he's going out there playing in stadiums, right? Or refereeing in stadiums that had, I don't know, 80,000 people in it.
80,000. Yeah.
Can you imagine? I mean,
I can't. I can't. But he did it, he did it. Yeah.
Was he by himself or did he have a team at that time or maybe one or two others? So I know there were other people Like
I
I don't
think-
know if it was John
I-
Bantu. I don't know if he was up on the FIFA list or
No, I think he went by himself.
Rex.
No, I
Rex
think
Osborne.
I think Rex Osborne comes to mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Keith Dunstan.
One definitely comes to mind. So
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Dunstan.
like how
Yeah.
old was Rex Osborne? Who else was around that time?
You would have had McNeil Smith. You would have had
Mr. Crackle.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So he might have had a team, you know.
right. Could
Might
have.
be worth looking into.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing's for sure. He went to the Lions Den as the official. I mean, the opposition would have been one, but what he would have had to go through. Well, he had both teams against him and the fans.
Could you and again, like, you know, Larry just said, you know, could you imagine? But could you imagine? Here they are, 90,000 World Cup match, and here's this guy from Bermuda, and they're probably half the stadium probably didn't even know where Bermuda was.
More than that.
Yeah, well, you know, and there was our representative. Charlie was there officiating that match.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
you know,
But I think Dunstan was our first to represent Bermuda at a World Cup.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure, he left his mark because, as Mr. Hunter already said earlier, if you could tell Randy Horton go get the ball, and Horton puts his head down and goes to get the ball, you're in total control because we know the antics of Mr. Horton on the sideline, whether player or coach. But I guess that's how much respect everyone, including someone like Horton, had for Mr. Marshall when he had that whistle. And one of the things that I would always remember is he always encouraged the young people, especially Mr. Red, you talked about, you thought he didn't know you. He kind of had an idea of who everyone was, and once he knew your name, he would call you by your name, and that's how he would get your attention and would say, as Mr. Wade has already said, hey, cut that out. Let's get on with the game. We're here to entertain these people who have paid them money to come and watch you play. So let's get on with it.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think he also told stories about like how he would train to be a referee as well. I mean, like fitness, like he'd be out on the roads, and I'm sure he said like around the North Shore, Smiths area.
right.
He would be out there training and making sure he was fit so that, he'll get in some actual referee training there and physical fitness training so he'd be ready for, 1 or 2 games during the week and the weekend.
Yeah.
So he took it seriously. And,
Yes.
yeah.
But he at some point he made the decision to stop playing whilst he was officiating because he was balancing out the two, and and now we see, as Mr. Williams has a lot of youngsters doing the same thing, and hopefully they may continue, as they get older, that they can kind of juggle if they want to stay in the game playing or reap the benefits of what we see now with the current group of FIFA officials who are traveling the world and representing us, as something that Mr. Marshall had done previous. And, now we have, do we have a team yet, Mr. Ed?
Not yet, sir. Mr. Williams is working diligently at his objective.
Or his mandate. Did you mandate that he gets a team?
I did.
He knows his mandate. But I have a name I ran into. What's the guy? I think he's going to coach him. Is Torrey Davis from Wolves? I saw him.
Yes, Torrey. Yes.
I saw him in the government administration building the other day, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing these days?" And he said he was coaching. I said, "What about refereeing?" I always say to players, "Hey, what about refereeing?" He said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about that too. I might go do that." So if Cranston or President, you're listening, I probably just got Mr. Davis in trouble, but
We're gonna follow up with him. Don't worry.
we have a follow up with him, and don't tell him you got it from me.
Well, you already told everybody. It's kind of too late for that now.
Mr. Marshall would be proud,
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
definitely. To see players taking up the mantle of being referees after finishing
Yeah.
playing or even as their career are winding down. I think it bodes well for the sport because you basically learn so much from playing. You learn even more from officiating because you see the game.
What would you have thought of VAR, and like how it's being used or goal line technology,
Well,
That's a whole different kettle of fish because they should have used goal line technology first and then VAR comes later because this VAR is yeah.
They could have used that. They could have used VAR, the FA Cup final, Somerset and Devonshire Colts.
no mercy.
67. The game was going on, was even and was 2-0. And Horton had scored. Charlie was a bit from the play. And he came down and says no goal. He said, "Oh, man."
Where was Rick Richardson with his car?
He said, "No, the ball went under the net, and he disallowed the goal."
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
He disallowed Brenda's goal.
A 40-yard volley, and we won the game. So
that's a good thing you won it.
But and surprisingly, Randy did not make off like he usually did because he knew Charlie Marshall was in charge.
there you go. There you go.
So yeah, remember that.
That says a lot. That says a lot.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Horton, the speaker, he is very very passionate about the things that he does. But
That's what you called it? Passionate?
Very
Yeah.
passionate, but respectful.
How does a man you call respectful get sent off every other week?
I don't know about that.
You don't?
In reflection, you have to put a kind of gentler lens on these things.
Okay.
We wouldn't talk about Mr. President me getting sent off. It's probably never ever happened.
There you go.
This is not about. This is
sure?
I know this show is not about Randy, but I remember we guys played hotels in the final game of the season, and we had to score. We had to beat hotels by 4 club goals. Hotel scores the first goal. We come back 10, 15 minutes ago. We're leading 4-1. Conrad Simons called Randy. Randy got up and said, "I'm not coming." And he never left the field.
Oh boy.
He continued again. Yeah, he said, "No, I'm not coming off the field. We got a game to win, but we won it, but we lost the game by a goal to the hotel."
It must be a Somerset Trojans thing. So I remember another player did that too. I'm not going to call his name. So he coming off.
I don't know.
Another 5 minutes to go or 7 minutes to go. He said, "I'm not coming off."
Okay, I know you're talking.
Yeah, 1, 2.
I don't think that's about passion. I just think he was just out of order and rude. That's all I know.
So, President, you said PAC had one as well?
Yeah, PAC had 1, 2.
Yeah.
Just
You
one?
will remain nameless.
Just one?
Yeah.
One player, so many different incidents, though, right?
No. So coming back to Mr. Marshall.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna take another commercial break. When we come back, we'll have more on Charlie Marshall. We'll be right back.
I'm also thankful and grateful because my greatest value of my life is my legacy.
But why I do it? I feel supposed to do it. I was put here to be here, to do what I'm doing right now. Once I see somebody moving, it's the greatest joy for me. There's a little person being born.
I am thankful that people have given me the trust, for me to empower them, from my players to my family to friends. And that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that people have allowed me and trusted me to be in their life.
all the weapons.
You seeing this?
Welcome to the new bulk store, Lindo's Next Level. Wake up in the morning with enough coffee to keep you running throughout the entire day. Your pet at home deserves the best. Stock up on dog food to keep your puppy happy. Need a quick, tasty lunch at home? Your chicken nuggets will be jumping right out of the freezer. What's a movie night without popcorn? You can never have too much. Lindo's Next Level. Why go anyplace else?
And welcome back. Well,
Earl, I felt like I was in a Cineplex just now, you know? The quality of that commercial material, geez.
well, welcome to Island Stats.
Oh, wow.
Well, Mr. Hunt, clearly you have plenty of stories about interactions with Mr. Marshall on the field of play. What was another one that stood out for you?
Well, I don't know if you remember a guy named Jerry and Terrell Simons.
Oh, yes.
And myself. Charlie came to us before a game and says, no. Because we were known as the henchmen. Charlie came to us before the game and said, listen, no nonsense out of you fellas today. But we try to turn it on as much as possible, but of course, couldn't always happen. But Charlie always talked to players. You know, like I said, that's how we gained respect for Charlie. He said, okay, well, no, we're not just going to be sending you off. I mean, we're talking to you. And his interaction with players was first class. That's what made him so good as a referee.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, again, Mr. Reed, you would have had those interactions with Mr. Marshall as well, first as a player and then getting involved in the association. But how did you find him whenever he was around? Because I know he was always that willing person to give, no matter who was in the room, no matter where, he would find a conversation and just give encouragement of whatever was going on.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that was Mr. Marshall in a nutshell, right? That he was always willing to you know, have that sort of conversation with you. You know, and for me, coming from the telecom space and then also being involved in football, you know, there were some parallels in our career. I never took up the whistle except for my one time, but you know, there were some parallels, and like I said, he modeled you know, how an administrator should be, and that's what I take from him.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know too much about the transition of presidencies, and but generally you get a chance to follow someone, you know, and Mr. Musselin, the first term that you done, who was the president just before you? Can you recall?
Was Neville Tyrrell.
Neville Tyrrell. Okay.
Right. And before him was Richard Thompson.
Right. That's right. But are there kind of things that you go through that you see what past presidents have been able to implement structurally wise? And if so, was there anything that stood out for you that Mr. Marshall would have left in place? Because the association has grown,
right?
You know, led by the president and his committee sort of thing. But through the years, we've seen it, you know, evolve. But what would you say that kind of he put in place to kind of set a path?
Well, I think that probably each president builds onto the previous president's work, right? So it's not like it's hostile. It's not one president against the other. It's like, okay, I've got the baton for a while and I'm going to be here. And then I go and then somebody else, you know, takes it up and moves on. But I think when I came there to the BFA, like about the late 90s, to just assist with fundraising, we didn't have a fundraising committee, and funding was pretty hard. So you get out there and you start working on the funding. But around the same time, FIFA started to push its development officers out into the world, right, to the regions, and to talk to the associations. And so you started to see a bit more funding coming from FIFA as well as from CONCACAF with their development programs. And then they started to realize that if you're going to have like an under 17 team that's going to be a competition, you can't just like expect them to have one training match when they're 17 to go in the under 17s, right? Or when they're starting out at 6 or playing probably their first competitive game at age 16. So, they had to get on board with like the CONCACAF tournaments with at the under 15 level. So by the time the official qualifying round start, then the team has been on the road, has had some experience, has had some exposure in international matches. And so I think that's the big difference. So lots of different programs like building BFA, getting lights, helping out with national associations. And I think President Reid would tell you now that it's even drilled down further, where they help the clubs that are in the programs through the national association. So I know that it was really tough back then when, national teams had to play, even World Cup. I remember going to Bank of Bermuda with, some of the BFA guys who just asked the Bank of Bermuda to come on as a title sponsor to put on a World Cup training match for the team to travel, not to train, but to travel. So I know all those presidents before, whether it was Neville, Richard, Mr. Dane, Mr. Marshall, everybody had that hanging over their head. And I'm sure President Reid has that now because everybody wants something, but it takes money.
Mm-hmm. And you would have been in charge when Mr. Marshall, would have been integral in getting the Premier Division named Digicel Premier Division.
Well, actually, you got to roll the clock back a little bit further because it was called AT&T.
Yes,
AT&T. And then there was another name too. It was AT&T. It became Digicel, but there was either one before.
The women's league was called Telecom.
So that might be so, but for the Premier Division, how we had it was like
singular?
AT&T.
Was
Yes,
it singular?
yes,
Singular.
yeah.
Singular, yes. Okay.
Yeah, because it was AT&T one year, Singular the next, and then Digicel after that. Yeah, so that was pretty good too because they came on board, supported the leagues, and then every team got something depending on how they finished, as well as the two promoted teams. So that was a nice start, and then we start drilling down to just get funding for international youth tournaments, some long-term strategic plans, because you have to really take care of the money, get the money really. And I think FIFA's lesson now, or has been for some time, is to how to monetize all the assets that you have.
Yeah, definitely. That's a one of FIFA's pillars is how can you do capacity building? How can you monetize the assets? And fundraising is still difficult. There's more demand, so you need more money.
Yeah.
And for me, as the president now, I can certainly appreciate the work that previous presidents have done, and I can only imagine how difficult it was when Mr. Marshall was the president.
So let me ask you, the current president, are there any plans to honor Mr. Marshall in coming weeks?
Well, there's a few things that are already in place. So we already have the under 17 tournament named in his honor that we play every year. When we were advised of his passing, you'll notice all our social media channels, the logo is black, and it will stay that way until he is laid to rest. And I'm sure the executive council will have some more discussions about if there's anything else that we should do in his honor. But that's what we've done so far.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take our final commercial break. When we come back, we'll wrap up this edition of Walk Down Memory Lane, remembering Charlie Marshall. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the new bulk store, Lindo's Next Level. Wake up in the morning with enough coffee to keep you running throughout the entire day. Your pet at home deserves the best. Stock up on dog food to keep your puppy happy. Need a quick, tasty lunch at home? Your chicken nuggets will be jumping right out of the freezer. What's a movie night without popcorn? You can never have too much. Lindo's Next Level. Why go anyplace else?
I'm also thankful and grateful because my greatest value of my life is my legacy.
But why I do it? I feel supposed to do it. I was put here to be here, to do what I'm doing right now. Once I see somebody moving, it's the greatest joy for me. There's a little person being born.
I am thankful that people have given me the trust, for me to empower them, from my players to my family to friends. And that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that people have allowed me and trusted me to be in their life.
Putting down the weapons.
You seeing this?
And welcome back. Well, I want to end tonight with a personal note from each of you. What would you remember most about Mr. Marshall? We'll start with you, Mr. Hunt.
Well, you couldn't question Charlotte's honesty. I remember a game Bermuda played Guatemala, National Stadium. We played the first leg of a World Cup in Guatemala. It was 0-0. Second leg was at the National Stadium with 100,000 people. And the game was going on, there was no score. And about 15 minutes ago, 12 minutes ago, Pepe Leo hit this thing about 35 yards in the back of the net. Everybody's running back to the center line. He goes up the flag. Mr. Marshall said it was offside. It was no one's friend that day, I can tell you. But he's an honest man. But that's one of my memories I would never forget about Charlie. He was an honest man. He told you like it was, and we didn't hold no punches. A great man, and it's going to be certainly missed in this whole community and in the sporting world.
Mr. Mussolini?
Yeah, I think I can remember him as being sort of a person who could give guidance and good advice behind the scenes, helping to support you in what you were doing as a president. That's what I appreciate. That's what I'll remember. Also remember him on the field. He had that commanding presence as well. But I think what I've read about is perhaps how he participated in football, and during the times when there would have been racial issues in Bermuda, and whether there was white leagues and black leagues, that he would have been able to be involved and make a difference when it came to the development of racial or racial harmony or progress in Bermuda. So you see Mr. Marshall at any club, at any of the Congress meetings, and he's just one of the guys. So he was right in there in the thick of things. So, and I think on a wider scale that football does an amazing job around the world, but certainly in Bermuda, of bringing people together of all walks of life. So Mr. Marshall made a huge contribution to that. That's what I'll remember.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess mine is my story is a bit more personal. In that, like I said, Mr. Marshall was in the technology space, like myself, and just to even echo Larry's comment that he was one of the guys, like, but my fondest memory of him would be every now and again you have people who will speak to you and make you feel like a kid again, and a word of encouragement or even accolades from Mr. Marshall did that for me. Where during one of the presentations for the under-17, she just leaned over to me and said, hey, I think you're doing a good job. Keep doing what you're doing. So for me, that's somebody who just made me feel like a kid again. You know what I mean? You got this outer statesman telling you he's proud of you is a big thing. It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys personally this evening for joining me here and talking about what Mr. Marshall has meant to the sport, to Bermuda, as you've all indicated. He wasn't just into football, but he was into the entire country and helped to change it. And as Mr. Musselin just said, he can go into any club and be one of the boys. And he just had that persona about it. And we'll remember Mr. Marshall for the rest of our lives. Definitely the contribution he's made to the Bermuda Football Association and to sport and to the community of Bermuda. So with that, I say, gentlemen, thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.